All right. We are in Colossians. If you want to jump to Colossians, we're in chapter 1 still. We got through just over one verse last week, meaning not quite 2 verses. So we'll continue that potentially at that same speed, but probably not. Maybe a little quicker. We'll see. Before we get started, I want to remind everybody that tomorrow we have our apologetics conference. You guys should come to that if you can make it. It's going to be awesome. Some things changed a little bit, so we're going to have a little bit more time for questions and answers. So if you do come, bring some hard questions, but remember that when you ask the question, say, this question is for March.
Asking for a friend. That's what you're supposed to say. I'm asking for a friend.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Well, you can ask for a friend. I'm just saying, if you have a really hard question, tell us that you want March to answer the question.
Oh, he's on the panel. Oh,
No, I'm not.
He's not on the panel, but
Oh,
he
he's
could
not.
he'll be there. He'll be there, so he could.
Okay.
I'll haggle from the crowd.
There you go. I don't know that.
All right. All right, so we are in first Colossians, the only Colossians. So Colossians. Last week we went through, we started verse 15. We went through that. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. And then we did a little bit of 16. For by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth. We didn't get any further than that. So before we do that, why don't we start by reading this section here, 15 through 18. And Tim, could you read for us verses 15 through 18?
Sure. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from among the dead, so that everything he might have the supremacy.
Awesome passage. So again, just like I mentioned last week, we talked about how Jesus was the visible image, or he is the image of the invisible God, which was really interesting. And then we talked about how he's the firstborn of creation, but he wasn't created, he was born. And it's just really interesting. And again, I got to bring it up because it's just kind of so cool. He's the firstborn, but he wasn't necessarily born first, which you may be like, what? That's kind of weird, because in our minds, Jesus was born 2,000 years ago-ish, and there was thousands of years before that where other people were born. But God doesn't experience time the same way that we do. So for him, he doesn't go by what's first in our chronological order, but he goes by what's first in priority and what's first in his perspective. It's Jesus. Jesus is the one who's the firstborn, because he's the one who created everything. And again, that kind of gets a little that gets interesting and fun to think about. So we talked about a little bit about that. We also started in that we were saying that in verse 16, Paul starts giving a list over some of the things that Jesus has priority over, that he has authority over. And he starts by talking about that he created everything that was in heaven and on earth. And again, this is just cool, because he's showing that God created everything in our universe, but he points it out in such a way that he shows that Jesus is responsible for all the really big things, but he's also responsible for all the little things as well. But then we get into this next pair right here, visible and invisible. And I just wanted to pause here for a minute. So we're talking that Jesus created everything that is visible and invisible. What do you think he's talking about when he says those things that are invisible?
Things that can be seen, things that can't be seen. That's simple.
Okay.
That is, yeah. It's interesting. I think it was last week, someone said that the reason you can't see God is because he's not, we only see matter. We see what's been created. We don't see God because God is not created. God is not matter. I think somebody said that last week, but it was stuck with me.
That's
all
correct.
week long.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody looked like they were going to talk.
I think this is material and immaterial stuff, right? Like it's too small to see, but it exists in the material realm, but also other things that are not necessarily material, like logic and math, you know?
Oh,
Or you could
awesome.
say
Good.
obvious, not obvious. He invented that which is obvious. I mean, he invented that which is not obvious.
Sure.
We're finding things today, like the DNA chains and how the cells work and all the little structures within the cell that were not obvious to us, but they were created by God.
So would you put that in the visible or would you put that in the invisible category?
Well, they used to be invisible, but today they're visible.
Yeah, so I would put that in the visible category because it is something that we can see, we can experience, we understand. I think this is really interesting because I think there's a very simple explanation to this, which is, and we should go over that first, which is God created everything that you're aware of and everything you're not aware of. So all those things that you're not aware of, he still was involved in that. And he still created that. And so there's these times when we can get in these situations where we're like, oh man, you know, things are going crazy or I don't understand what's going on, but you can rest and know that Jesus knows all that's going on. He created it all, even if you're not aware of it. So there's that aspect of this, which is really cool. We don't want to minimize it. But I wonder also if this is suggesting that there are things that are not visible that we don't even know about.
Like different, I guess I look at it like we have our physical world that we're living in, and then you've got these spiritual battles going on in the spiritual realm that we can't even see, that we might not necessarily be aware of.
Yeah.
I think back to your reference of the night vision camera from last week, how we just can't see that spectrum, but it's still going on.
And so there is more to the physical and the material that's going on in our universe. There's more than that. There's also this other aspect of of reality that we aren't aware of that's just not visible. So so Edwards, you said a little bit about that just now, and it sounds like you're talking about angels and demons and that type of thing. Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about something totally
No, I
different?
would be angels and demons, you know, the spiritual battle that's going on that we cannot see. Now, whether that's the spiritual battle within ourselves or the spiritual battle around, where there's forces of good and evil that are in constant conflict with one another. I feel that stuff's going on.
Okay. So just to be clear, just what the Bible's saying here, Jesus created all of that too. You know, it's just so we're all on the same page. He created everything we see, and then we know about some things that we don't see, and he created those as well. How much do we know about angels and demons? What do you guys think? Do we know a lot about them? We know a little bit about them. Do you guys know what they eat for breakfast?
Well, we only know what God's word tells us about them, right? I mean, basically, I mean,
Okay.
We know there's a lot of them.
yeah.
Okay.
We know that
I
they're
know-
more
I
powerful
know
than
what-
we are.
I know one thing, you're not
Yeah.
supposed to, they're scary. Because
Mm.
he always says, do not be afraid.
Yeah. When those angels pop up, I like in Daniel, he's asleep and an angel pops up while he's asleep and he falls down on the ground. He's so terrified that while he's asleep, he falls down. Yeah.
They have a ranked system like the military.
Yeah,
We've
there's
entertained some unaware.
Yeah.
I said, we've entertained some angels unaware.
okay.
I've dated a few.
That's awesome.
Yep. Yep. Very true.
So I just want to point out a few things here. Like when we talk about angels and demons and all of that stuff, we use some words that are really, really generic. Just to point out, the word angel means messenger. It actually refers to the job, not to the type of being. So when the Bible, when it talks about angels, it could be talking, there are times that it uses the word angel in reference to a person, or sometimes it's in reference to a church, and some other, there are some other times where it could have some different meanings. We use it to mean supernatural beings, but we don't know a whole lot, and we know so little that we don't call them supernatural beings. We call them by the job that they have, which is as a messenger. So I'm just pointing this out because one of the things that God is pointing out here, at least as I was reading it and I'm getting all excited about it, is the universe is much bigger than what we realize. Because what he just told us here is he created everything that we can't see. I mean, everything we can see and everything that we can't see. And it just, to me, it seems like just the way that this is all going, it's possible that what we can't see, the amount of what we can't see is just as big as the amount of stuff we can see. And that's huge. And if that's the case, there's a whole side of our universe which we don't even recognize and we don't even understand. And so I just want to point this out because this is cool. Jesus is still saying he created all of it. There's this movie, I was talking to my kids. I've been trying to talk my kids into watching this movie with me. I saw a really long time ago. I think it's an okay movie to watch, so don't judge me if it's not. I just don't remember. But this movie called Signs. And it's an M. Night Shyamalan movie where he likes to have twists in his movie. And they're like, I'm not going to watch it. It's too scary. So I'm like, okay, let me tell you a little bit about it. And so I tell them this movie is great because they're throughout the first part of the movie, they're making fun of people who believe that aliens exist. And so it turns out in this movie that aliens do exist, right? And so you think this is the twist. The twist is that aliens exist. That's not the twist in the movie. The twist that he does in this movie is not that aliens exist, it's that God exists. And the whole point of it is that it doesn't matter that aliens exist. It doesn't change the fact that God exists and he still has authority over those other things that we don't know about, those aliens. And so it's one of those things where I think they even say in the movie where they say, hey, if aliens exist, just changes everything. And somebody else is like, no, I don't think it changes anything. And that's the cool thing that we see here. There's a whole bunch of things in our world, in our reality, that we don't know about. And when we learn about it, you might be like, oh no, this changes everything. I've got to reevaluate everything. But Jesus right here, he's saying, nope, you don't need to do that. He still created it. He's still in charge of all of it.
That would be a good question
cool.
for this Saturday. If aliens exist, how does that change your perspective on God?
Yeah, that would be a good question.
That's a good question for March.
Tim,
Hey,
John
this
is
is good.
John is going to be on the panel, and so you should ask that question.
Well, you can
I would love to
prepare
talk
for that
about.
one.
No, I would love to talk about aliens because I think the Bible suggests that they do exist. But I think what we talk about when we say aliens, we don't know what we're talking about. We're just talking about what we see on TV. Because if you're asking if there are beings, that didn't grow, weren't born here on Earth and are in our universe, then we just talked about angels. They qualify.
They weren't
But
born.
anyways, it's like, well, I don't know. Not the same way we were.
That's true.
I don't know how that all works.
Well, I've seen all the Marvel
Anyways.
movies, and I know aliens exist. So there.
That's
Well,
right.
I know they exist sometimes when I play golf because I think they abduct me.
Anyways, that's a fun topic. But I just wanted to bring this up here. This is cool. God is telling us, Paul is telling us that Jesus created all things, everything in heaven, everything on earth, everything visible and everything invisible. He has authority over all of that. So let's keep going. It says, what verse are we in? 16. It says, for by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created through him and for him. So now he's been talking and he's been doing these things in pairs in heaven and earth, visible and invisible. And then he does this one where he has, what do you call it? I don't know what you call it when you have four. Quintuplets? No, that's five. I don't know. He has four things. He created everything, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. And I'll be honest here, I'm looking at this and I'm studying it and I'm looking at the different words and I'm like, I don't understand the difference between all of these four words. I'm like, I can't, if he's trying to make a point by saying all four different categories, I don't know what the point is. So maybe you do. Do you guys have any thoughts on why he's using four words to describe four different types of government?
Covering all these bases.
Leave no stone unturned.
All right, so you're saying he's just trying to make it super clear that no matter what government, no matter what authority is going on, he's the one who created all of those.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm catching?
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds reasonable. I mean, that's still pretty cool. Go ahead, Marge.
Oh, some people have said that these are the rank system for the invisible, So
Sure.
you're talking about demons and angels, and so this is kind of like the rank systems. I don't know. I just heard that before.
I saw that somewhere too. I just didn't know where they got it from. But yeah, okay. Sean, what were you gonna say?
Well, if you look at thrones and dominions, that would be on earth. And if you look at principalities and powers, that's in heaven or the invisible. So there's a physical and invisible.
That is interesting, right? Because then that means that God is in control of the governments that are here on earth, which by itself saying that is insane because, well, insane is not the right word. It's amazing because there's a lot of governments here on earth where you'd be like, somebody's in control of that? That doesn't seem right. Like, North Korea, they pretty much just do whatever they want to do. But then this is saying they still have limitations. They still have authority over them. And then it's interesting if this is what you're saying is true, Sean, then that means there's a governmental system in the invisible realm as well, and those things that we don't see, which that by itself is amazing. That shows that there's some structure, there's some organization for how that works, and that it's very similar in the way that we work in regards to authority. That's interesting.
If you look at the Greek words for each of those equivalent words, it does indicate a spiritual realm for some, as opposed to an earthly realm for others.
Okay, that sounds amazing. That's great. It means but just to point out, if we have these governmental systems here on earth that kind of seem like they're rogue and kind of get to do like whatever they want to, I mean, they do have restrictions, right? North Korea can't bomb some people because they know other people are going to come in and bomb them and they would be wiped out. So they have to show some restraint. And so we see in general, like the leader of North Korea, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his name because I'll say it wrong. He basically does whatever he wants, right? If he doesn't want somebody alive, they won't be alive anymore. So it seems like he has a good deal of authority, but he still has somebody he has to answer to. And that is what we're saying here, is that Jesus still has preeminence over that. He still has authority and power. And if we take that to the spiritual realm, then it might suggest that there are some of those in the spiritual realm who maybe have the same type of thing where it seems like they get to do whatever they want to do. They have to show some restraint because there's some opposing powers who are forcing them to show restraint. But on top of all of that, they still have an authority structure that is over them, that someone who's over control over them because they created them. So it's really interesting. I like this. I feel like I can keep talking about this, but maybe we've killed this horse, and I don't know if I want to beat him. So if anybody has something else to say, now's the time to bring it up. Otherwise, we're moving on. So we don't want to miss the last part of this verse. It says, all things were created through him and for him. What do you mean when it was created for him? Oh, my machine just glitched. Did you guys hear me?
Yeah.
What do you think it means when he says he created it for him? So this might rub some people the wrong way. They might be like, what? He created for him?
I mean, not for me.
Okay, I like that. Not for Charlie. I mean, and you're right. We can generalize that, right? There's not any of us.
Yeah.
The world's not created for us. Yeah, that's that egocentric view of the world, right? Everything is related to me, and everything that's not related to me is not important.
Right.
And here we're finding out that's not true.
Marketing, they always told me there's a favorite radio station, WIFM. That means what's in it for me. So as you're marketing and selling, you want to make sure that you satisfy the customer that this is the best thing for them, the only thing for
Are you
them.
guys?
And they
So
need
my
it.
internet just keeps.
Yeah, you're kind of flickering around there a little bit, John.
Yeah.
It's the cat.
Yeah. Move the cat's tail to the left a little bit, John, then it'll probably pick up better.
Put a dog up there, you'll be fine.
It's for his pleasure.
I like that. It's for his
Yeah,
pleasure.
he has a plan, and that plan is something we can't see. We don't know what the end game is. Whether the guy in North Korea and all these other crazies that are in charge of governments, he still has a plan, and all of these things come together for his plan. And it's not like we were saying, it's not for our plan,
Right.
because we don't see the big picture. He sees the end game. He sees how it's going to end, and all of these things play into it, and it all ends up for him. Because at the end, where do? We all end up either in heaven and hell, and those in heaven are going to glorify and honor God.
Right.
It's going to be about that.
When you make a plan, don't you enjoy it when it comes together?
Mhm.
Isn't that what he's doing? He's enjoying his plan is coming together. It's what he's set out. So he's enjoying that.
Yeah. So this also means that he has that there's purpose, right? We have a purpose.
Yeah.
Everything here there has a purpose. And to point this out, he's saying there's purpose in both those things we can see, and there's purpose in those things we can't see. Although we don't necessarily see how those things are related, because there's a lot of things we can't see, they are God's plan, purpose. It involves all of those. I don't know if you guys get that.
We'll book it up, but well, I always think of the question that people ask all the time: what's kind of the deep spiritual? What's the chief end of man? And it's to glorify God. And I think this kind of goes back and points that out. He made the plan. He made the rules. he gets to drive the bus, so to say.
Yeah.
My
Definitely.
Charles Stanley commentary says numerous times throughout the reading of the book of his scriptures that we were created to have an intimate relationship with God. And he loves us so much. And that he wants us to have a relationship with him through prayer and reading his word. And nothing makes him more happier than know that we do that. And it's essential that we spend time with him every day.
Wow. Well, my internet is going crazy right now, so I apologize for that. But let's read the next verse and we'll try to talk about it. Now, verse 17, it says, Dad, would you read verse 17?
And he is before all things, and in him all things consist.
All right. What do you think it means to be before all things?
He's the beginning. He was before all things. There's nothing existed before him.
Yeah.
Even spiritual or I don't know. It's like asking me, well, I don't know. It's like asking me something I can't explain, to explain God. It's like asking a cake to explain a cook. Sorry. He's just before all things. He's way, way, way ahead of me.
Yeah. We don't want to miss that or forget that. And Paul's been drilling that in these last few verses, trying to get us to realize and understand that he is, although Jesus was born from Mary, he existed before that, and he was before all things. He's the one who created all things. So we don't want to get this weird doctrine how Jesus just existed when he was born. He existed before he was born. And it's a hard concept for us to understand because none of us were like that. We all existed after we were born. But just so Paul's being clear, he was before all things. And then he says something that's really interesting. And in him, all things consist. Tim, I don't remember what yours said, but it said something slightly different. What did yours say?
Hold together.
Yeah, I like that. What do you think that means, that all things consisted in him, or he holds all things together?
Nothing would exist except that he wills it to exist. I mean, this is the guy that said, let there be light, let there be earth, let there be land, let there be. He spoke and it came to be. If he didn't say, let there be, it wouldn't be. So.
Yeah, say that everything continues is because it's God's will.
Right.
And at the snap of a finger, he could just turn it off and that, pull the plug. That's it for anything. Any little creature, because, he knows, for example, let's say you have an animal that only eats another animal and you want to take it out. Well, boom, there goes your food source. Now what you going to do? Or just turn everything off. Whatever God's will is, it will be done.
Yeah, I think this shows us just a step further, Dad, from what you were saying is how he created everything. All things exist by him. I think this means all things continue to exist by him. And so he's actively involved in every single person's life, actively keeping them together, because if he stopped, you don't exist anymore. He's the one holding it all together. which means he's not a hands-off God. He's not a God who sits up in the clouds and just watches everything kind of just go along. It's like, okay, whatever you guys want to do. He's actually involved making sure that we stay together. Otherwise, we just all fall apart, fly off the planet, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, Hebrews 1:3 says that he sustains everything. He sustains the entire universe with the power of his word, right? So like what's interesting to see that picture that you depicted, John, like not only did he create all things, but he continues to govern the entire universe, right? And sustains it. And so it's interesting that all the categories that we've mentioned so far, that's what I think Paul is trying to do. He's trying to, a simple, in a Paul way that he can, like categorize everything in the universe, so that to point to the fact that not only did Jesus create everything, but he also sustains everything. Because we were talking about invisible and then visible. We're talking about the different kinds of government. We're talking about, now we're talking about everything consists through him. So it's kind of cool to see that, that he's the grace of God and the power of God in the sustaining of everything.
I like it.
So knowing that, can man destroy his creation, or can he just mess it up a little bit?
That is an awesome question. Go ahead, Edward.
So I was gonna say, I think man's doing exactly what he was supposed to do. Then every silly little thing we do or think that we're gonna fix, God already knows, and he already saw it coming. I can only imagine what it must be like just to watch your creation happen and just know what's coming down the pipe and just all they think of just to already know what's coming our way, and just, oh, these people, they have no idea. So yeah, I don't know. I think God already knows what we're gonna do.
I think also that God is a master of he's a master tactician, and there are times that the world thinks that they are trying to make things happen and manipulate things. And I'll give an example. Our elections, I think it's incredible how every 4 years we pick a new leader of our country. And there are times where it seems very clear that one particular person is going to win and they don't win. Somebody else wins. And it could be like you're right up until the last month before elections. And then something happens and everybody's like, oh, no, I'm not going to vote for that guy now. And it changes enough votes where somebody else wins. And I'm just pointing out that we have our own tactics, and we have our own, we try to control things and we try to do things in this world. And guess what? We don't actually have as much control as we think we do, because God can just swing in there, do some little thing, and boom, it'll change the minds of millions of people and it'll change the outcome. And so I mean, the question, Tim, can we destroy this universe? Can we destroy this world? I think it's a good question. Can we? But I think it really depends on if he'll allow us to. I think he has enough authority and enough control where he's like, it's only going to happen if he lets us. If he doesn't let us, it's not going to happen, because he can thwart us in lots of different ways to prevent it from happening if he wants to, but maybe it's part of his plan. Although he does give us some details on that part of that stage of the game where the world is ending.
I look at the way nature takes over, and how, man comes in and they try to make their homes and pave over things and whatnot. And then the next thing you know, nature takes over and it goes back to the way it was. And it's almost like God saying, yeah, okay, you had your little moment, but this is mine. This is how I want it to be. And this is how it's going to be. I have that issue with weeds. You keep making a spray and you think they'll never come back, but they always come back.
I mean, it's a good point, right? Because even just the power of nature is more than what we can handle. You could be in Japan working on your garden thinking, I'm going to get this tomato crop going so that I can eat it next week. And then there's a giant earthquake and a tsunami and it just washes everything away. So you've got your plan, you're trying to accomplish something, and then there's a tidal wave and that's just going to change everything. You can't stop it. We don't have the technology or the power to stop something as simple as a tsunami. I say simple, it's not necessarily weak. It's not weak, but it is kind of simple. It's very interesting. Well, let's get into this next verse. Let's see. Verse 18. And it says, and he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he may have the preeminence. So I'm just looking at the time and there's a few things in here. Let's talk about two things. We'll start with, he is the head of the body. What do you think it means that he's the head of the body?
Christ is the head of the body of believers.
Well, the next part is, it says the church. So he's already telling you what the body is. The body is the church. Just as Dan said, it's all us believers, or the universal church, not each individual little churches. It's the body of believers, which is the church.
But I just want to point out, he says he's the head. That's important, because the head suggests that not only is he in charge, but he's guiding us, right? It's not a ruthless, vindictive, he's in charge and he's going to beat you into submission. This is he's in charge and everybody's already submitted to the head. That's the way we're wired. That's the way things are set up. He's going to lead us in one way and we're going to follow, because he's the head. He's the one who is doing all of the directing of our bodies and everything. So I'm just pointing this out because it says he's the head of the church. It doesn't say he's the head of the people of mankind. It just says he's the head of church. He's going to work in a different way when he's controlling those who aren't of the church, because he's not the head. So this is cool. This also suggests that we have to be, if he's the head of our church, we've got to be involved with him, right? We've got to be speaking to him and get our communication. We got to be in communication with him and connected to him. If we're not connected to him, a body without a head is useless, right? You can use it for fertilizer. You can't use it for much more than that. It's dead. So it's just important to understand he's the head. We have to stay connected to him, and he guides us, and he's in control because he's the head, which is one way of being in control of things, and it's different than some of the other things he's in control of. But also, we don't want to miss the second part, which I think is really cool here. And it says, the firstborn from the dead. And I just got to bring that up because this is one of those phrases that we've been talking about where it seems like a contradiction. Life doesn't come from death. You won't, nobody's the firstborn from the dead, but Jesus is. And this is really interesting. What's that? Go ahead.
Because he rose, Lazarus and a few other guys came back to life, but they didn't, by their own power and their own strength, just rise from the dead. He's the first one who was dead and then was reborn, you could say. And then there's no doubt in anybody's mind that he wasn't dead when they put him in that tomb. But he then decided that, he wasn't going to stay dead. He just woke up, and that's kind of interesting. I can't do that. I mean, if I die, I'm going to die and I'm going to stay dead. I'm probably going to want to stay dead because I'll be in heaven, and I don't want to come back to the earth once I'm in heaven. But he came back. So anyway, he's the firstborn. He's the first risen.
And that's a good point with Lazarus, right? Because Lazarus died and then he came back to life and then he died again. So he was brought back to life, which is an incredible, amazing thing, but it was just a postponement of death. he didn't have this new life that came up after he was dead. But Jesus, he died and he came back to life, and then he's not dying ever again. It has a new life. So what he's bringing to the table is this new type of existence, this new resurrection where you can die and you can come back to life and then not experience death anymore. And he's the first one of those. And so if he's the first one, it would suggest that there's going to be others. Who do you think are these other people or these other beings that are going to die and come back to life and not die again?
Me. I am. I look forward to it.
All those that believe.
It's incredible. It's incredible. Sometimes we get this idea that our worst enemy is Satan. He's the accuser. He's the one, who's actively working against us. But I think that maybe our worst enemy is death. Everybody struggles with death, right? People will spend all their money to try to keep themselves alive. We do all sorts of things surrounding death, trying to hide the fact of the power that it has. And here's Jesus like saying, you don't need to worry about death anymore, because here's an example. I'm going to die, I'm going to come back to life, and there's no more death. And it's really amazing. Well, I don't know what to say, guys. I think that might be a good place to hang it up, particularly since I keep dropping off. Do you guys have any other thoughts?
Just one quick one. I appreciate that he uses firstborn here, just as he uses it in verse 15, which is really in connection with the preeminence concept, right? Like it's not first as how we see it first, like how you mentioned it, but it's in terms of rank and position, right? Like, so when he's talking about the firstborn from the dead, or the firstborn over all creation, we're not talking about being created first or being born first, but it's really a demonstration of like a title, rank, and preeminence. So it's kind of cool to see that. And I love that he did that too. So you can go, oh, he's not talking about really being born, it's something else.
Yeah, it all reminds me of 1 Corinthians 8:6, where it says, yet for us there is one God, the Father, of whom all things, and we for him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, through whom all things and through whom we live. Right? That's where it is, right? It's through Christ that we live. Without Christ, we don't live. We're dead.
Yeah.
He also came back from the dead, a different being. In other words, he still ate, he still did the things we do, but he could walk through walls, he could, all those things. So it's being firstborn of that type, which is where we're going to be. So I think we're going to have those same attributes in heaven that he had as being firstborn of that. So it's going to be interesting to see what heaven's really going to be like, because we can imagine all those things, but when we get there, it's going to be thousands of times better than what we could even imagine. And that's what, when you think about the invisible, we don't know. It's what we don't know that we're going to see. So it'll be very cool to get to that point where we can see, like Dan was saying, I can't wait. I can't wait.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I suspect that the scope of our understanding is so small that everything is just going to blow us away. Just the way things look, the way things taste, I mean, everything is going to be completely, we're going to be like, whoa, I'm looking forward to it.
I don't even think our mansions are going to be what we call mansions. I don't know what they're going to be, but I don't think they're going to be mansions like houses. I think there's something way beyond that up there.